All right, so you ready to dive into some tavern games today?
Oh, always ready to roll some dice and cause some chaos. That's what taverns are for, right?
That's what I like to hear. And it's funny you should mention chaos because that kind of leads us to this awesome article we're diving into. 10 unique tavern games to enliven your RPG sessions.
Sounds like just the thing to spice up those moments when the party's nursing their ale and wondering what to do next.
Exactly. I mean, we've all been there, right?
Yeah.
The party's just finished a big battle. They stumble into the nearest tavern, and it kind of becomes this, like, lull in the action.
Right. They're catching their breath, maybe comparing wounds, but narratively speaking, it's easy for those tavern scenes to fall a little flat.
And that's where these unique tavern games come in. The article really emphasizes how taverns are like the heart of a lot of fantasy worlds. They're not just places to eat and drink, they're like microcosms of the world itself.
Absolutely. They're teeming with gossip and rumors, shady characters lurking in the corners, maybe even a quest or two being offered in hushed tones.
And what better way to tap into that energy than with some games? But we're not talking about your typical game of darts or arm wrestling here.
Oh no, this article takes it to a whole other level. We're talking about games that are integrated with your world, games that reveal character, games that can even spark new plot lines.
Okay, now you've really piqued my curiosity. Give me an example. What's one of these unique tavern games?
Well, let's start with something simple, yet classic with a twist. How about Dragon's Dice? It's got that familiar Yahtzee vibe, but with, a bit of a fantasy flair.
Okay, I'm already picturing a dimly lit tavern, a roaring fireplace, maybe a shady bard in the corner, strumming a lute. Paint me a picture. How does this Dragon's Dice actually work?
All right, so imagine this. You've got your standard set of dice, players take turns rolling, aiming for certain combinations. So far, so good, right?
Yeah, sounds straightforward enough.
But here's where it gets interesting. Instead of just relying on pure luck, a character's skills and abilities can actually influence the game.
Oh, now that's clever. So like my halfling rogue with crazy high dexterity, she might get an extra die roll.
Exactly. Or maybe your stoic dwarf paladin with super high wisdom, they might get to re-roll a specific number.
Suddenly, those character sheets they spent hours on actually matter, even when they're just trying to unwind after a long day of adventuring.
Precisely. It adds this whole other layer of strategy and role-playing to something as simple as rolling dice in a tavern.
It's like they're not just playing a game, they're embodying their characters, thinking, what would my character do in this situation? Love it.
Right, and it keeps things unpredictable for you as the game master, too. You're not just running a scripted encounter. You're reacting to their choices, their skills, and maybe even throwing in a few curveballs of your own.
Now that's what I call dynamic storytelling. But let's say we've got some players who are less about slaying dragons with dice and more about, well, acquiring shiny loot, maybe through some creative problem solving.
Ah, you're talking about those roguish types, the ones with a knack for bending the rules.
Maybe breaking them all together, who knows? What kind of tavern game would entice those crafty characters?
Well, for them, we might have to break out a deck of cards and a mischievous grin. Let me introduce you to Goblin's Gold.
Ooh, intrigue already. Tell me more.
Picture this. A dimly lit corner of the tavern, a group huddled around a table, cards clutched tightly in their hands, a pile of gold glinting in the center.
Okay, the scene is set. I can practically smell the ale and hear the whispers. What's the objective of this Goblin's Gold?
It's all about bluffing, risk-taking, and, well, maybe just a little bit of good-natured deceit. Think of it like poker, but with goblins and, potentially higher stakes.
I knew it. I can already see how this would appeal to the more, shall we say, entrepreneurially minded players in my group. But I like how you mentioned character integration. How would that come into play with a card game?
Well, think about it. Is your player the type who bets big and throws caution to the wind, just like their barbarian character charges headlong into battle?
Oh, absolutely. I can totally see that happening.
Or are they more calculated, playing their cards close to the vest, just like their cunning rogue character would plan a heist?
It's like role-playing without even realizing they're role-playing. Just a natural extension of how their characters operate in the world.
Exactly. And just imagine the stories that can spin out of a simple card game. Maybe that game of Goblin's Gold reveals a hidden talent for gambling in the party's timid cleric. Who knew?
Or maybe it sparks a bitter rivalry between the group's rogue and the bard, who both think they're the most cunning card sharp in the party.
Now you're talking. And speaking of sparking intrigue and uncovering secrets, let's not forget about those players who live for a good puzzle. We've got something for them too. Mystic's Maze.
Riddles. I love it. But let me guess, this isn't just about pulling random brain teasers out of a hat, is it?
You know me better than that. This article is all about integration. The Mystic's Maze is your chance to weave in local legends, historical events, maybe even foreshadowing of what's to come in your campaign.
So instead of just testing general knowledge, you're tapping into the game world itself. That's brilliant.
Imagine the aha moment when a player realizes the answer to a riddle about a haunted forest is tucked away in a piece of lore they picked up sessions ago.
Talk about rewarding those players who really absorb those world-building details. Now, speaking of details, I'm picturing those players who love to create, to spin a good yarn. What's our next game night option for them?
For them, we raise a glass to the Bard's Challenge. This one's all about collaborative storytelling and improvisation, fueled by a bit of friendly competition and maybe a pint or two.
Okay, this sounds perfect for my group. We've got a bard who lives for the spotlight. How would this challenge actually work in a tavern setting?
Picture a circle of adventurers, the bards strumming their lute. Maybe you give them a starting prompt tied to your world, a legendary hero, a magical artifact, a spooky tavern tale. Then each player adds a line or two to the story, building off the last.
Oh, I love that. It's like those improv games, but with swords and sorcery. And I bet you could even have those stories impact the game world itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Maybe a particularly rousing tale attracts the attention of a wealthy patron seeking brave adventurers. Or perhaps a tall tale paints a target on the group's back, courtesy of a shadowy figure who didn't appreciate their version of events.
So much potential for unexpected consequences and side quests. This is why I love incorporating games into these tavern moments. They're like little narrative seeds just waiting to sprout.
Exactly. And speaking of seeds, or perhaps I should say shadows, our next game might appeal to those players who prefer stealth and subterfuge. Let's talk about Thieves' Gambit.
Ooh, intrigue. Late on. What makes this game perfect for those cunning, shadowy types?
Imagine a game where players are dealt a hand of cards, each representing a different tool or technique in a thief's arsenal: lockpicks, disguises, maybe even a well-placed distraction.
Okay, I'm hooked already. What's the objective? Are they trying to pull off a heist within the game itself?
Precisely. But the beauty of Thieves' Gambit is that it can be so much more than a game. It could be a way for players to gather intel, case out a potential mark, or even forge connections with the city's underworld, all from the safety of a dimly lit tavern booth.
Now that's what I call immersive gameplay. You're not just playing a game, you're living it through your character's eyes.
And let's not forget the element of risk versus reward. Do they play it safe, or go for a high-stakes move that could land them a fortune, or get them tossed in the dungeon?
Oh, the tension. I bet you could practically cut it with a dagger. But let's say we've got some players who are less about picking pockets and more about slinging spells. What have we got for them?
Well, for those who wield arcane power, there's Wizard's Duel. Think of it as a battle of wits, but instead of swords, they're wielding knowledge of spells, magical lore, and maybe a few enchanted artifacts for good measure.
Okay, I'm already picturing the sparks flying.
Yeah.
How would this play out in a tavern? Are we talking about a full-blown magic duel with pyrotechnics and everything?
Now, while I'm sure that would be a sight to behold, this duel is more about mental agility and strategic thinking. Imagine rounds of trivia, puzzles based on ancient runes, maybe even a challenge to identify the components of a complex potion.
So it's not just about memorizing a spell book, it's about understanding how magic functions in this world. That's brilliant.
And think about how this game could help players further invest in your world's magical systems. Suddenly, that obscure bit of lore about dragon scales having fire-resistant properties could give them the edge in a duel.
You're speaking my language. I love how these games can subtly reinforce those world-building details. It's like sneaking in a little extra learning without anyone realizing it.
Exactly. And just like with the other games, Wizard's Duel can have ripple effects throughout the campaign. Maybe a player invents a spell on the fly during the duel.
And then later, they try to use that spell in a real-life magical showdown. That's amazing. It's like the line between the game world and the real world starts to blur.
Exactly. And that's where those truly memorable role-playing moments emerge. But not all games have to be about high-stakes wagers or arcane knowledge. Sometimes a bit of good old-fashioned strength and strategy is in order, which is where Ogre's Arm Wrestle comes in.
Okay, but when I hear Ogre's Arm Wrestle, I'm picturing a very specific type of player character dominating this game. And probably flipping the table while they're at it.
And while your Goliath Barbarian might feel right at home, Ogre's Arm Wrestle isn't just about brute strength. Think of it like this. Each player gets a pool of points they can spend on feats of strength, clever maneuvers, even psychological tactics to distract their opponent.
So, a nimble halfling rogue with a knack for dirty tricks could actually outmaneuver a muscle-bound orc.
Exactly. It becomes a mental game as much as a physical one. Maybe your halfling spends points to loosen a floorboard, or convinces the orc they've got a lucky charm, shaking their confidence just a smidge.
I love how these games let those less appreciated skills shine. It's not always about who can swing the biggest sword, right? Speaking of which, I'm guessing our next tavern game is geared toward those players who know their way around a forest better than a city street.
You're on the right track. Ranger's Riddles is all about testing those nature skills and lore knowledge. Imagine riddles about animal tracks, edible plants, maybe even challenges based on identifying different types of wood or predicting the weather.
That's so clever. It's like a mini survival course, but with the added bonus of a warm fire and a pint of ale.
And it doesn't have to be limited to those with Ranger on their character sheet. Think about how this could challenge a city-dwelling noble to think outside their usual experiences, or give a bookish wizard a chance to apply their knowledge of herbology.
You've got me thinking, what if we took this Ranger's Riddles idea a step further? Instead of just presenting pre-written riddles, what if players took turns creating their own, inspired by the world around them?
Now that's what I call interactive storytelling. They're not just players anymore, they're world builders, adding their own layer of detail and lore to the game.
Exactly. And speaking of concocting something unique, our next game might require a fire extinguisher and a waiver for anyone sitting too close to the table. Tell me about Alchemist's Mix.
Ah, yes. This one's a recipe for chaos in the best possible way. Picture a game where players take turns gathering ingredients, herbs, minerals, maybe even a few dubious substances they found under the floorboards of the tavern, and combining them to brew potions.
Okay, I'm already imagining the disastrous and hilarious outcomes. Tell me more about the mechanics. Are we talking dice rolls, card draws, what?
The beauty of Alchemist's Mix is its flexibility. You could have players roll dice to determine the potency of their ingredients, draw cards representing different alchemical effects, or even use a point-based system where they have to balance the risks and rewards of each ingredient.
So a daring alchemist might throw in a pinch of that glowing green powder, even though it comes with a 50-50 chance of causing spontaneous combustion.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And those unexpected outcomes are what make this game so memorable. Maybe a botched potion turns a player's hair green or gives them a temporary case of uncontrollable flatulence.
Oh, the role-playing potential.
Mm.
I can already picture the players trying to explain their bizarre transformations to the stoic tavern owner with a straight face.
And just imagine the in-game consequences. Maybe that accidentally brewed love potion causes a brawl between two rival mercenary groups, or a potion that was supposed to cure a cold ends up giving the whole party the hiccups for the next 3 sessions.
This is why I love these tavern games. They inject a sense of unpredictability and player agency into the game, leading to those hilarious, off-the-cuff moments that everyone remembers long after the session ends.
Absolutely. And to wrap up our tavern game night, we have an option for the musically inclined, Siren's Song.
Okay, before you even explain, I'm already picturing a scene. The lights are low, a lone lute player in the corner strikes a chord, and suddenly,
the entire tavern erupts in a cacophony of off-key singing, impromptu drum circles on overturned tables, and possibly a bard challenging someone to a lute battle.
you get me. But seriously, how would Siren Song actually work as a structured game?
Think of it as a musical game of charades. One player hums a tune, taps out a rhythm, or maybe even describes a musical style, and the others have to guess the song or artist.
That's fantastic. It's a great way to encourage players to express themselves creatively, maybe even discover hidden talents within the group.
Exactly. And it can be tailored to fit any genre or setting. Imagine a swashbuckling sea shanty competition in a pirate-themed campaign, or a haunting melody echoing through a forgotten temple, its secrets waiting to be unlocked by those who can decipher the music.
This deep dive has been an absolute goldmine. I'm walking away with a notebook full of ideas to breathe life into my tavern scenes.
The best part is, these are just starting points. The real magic happens when you, the game master, weave these games into your world, connecting them to your characters and stories.
So the next time your players belly up to that tavern bar, remember, it's not just a place to grab a drink and rest their weary bones. It's a stage for intrigue, a laboratory for alchemical mishaps, and maybe even the starting point for an epic ballad. All it takes is a little imagination and a willingness to let the games begin. Oh, the role-playing potential. I can already picture the players trying to explain their bizarre transformations to the stoic tavern owner with a straight face.
And just imagine the in-game consequences. Maybe that accidentally brewed love potion causes a brawl between two rival mercenary groups,
Well,
or a potion that was supposed to cure a cold ends up giving the whole party the hiccups for the next 3 sessions.
okay, that's amazing.
This is why I love these tavern games. They inject a sense of unpredictability and player agency into the game, leading to those hilarious off-the-cuff moments that everyone remembers long after the session ends.
Absolutely. And to wrap up our tavern game night, we have an option for the musically inclined Siren Song.
Okay, before you even explain, I'm already picturing a scene. The lights are low, a lone lute player in the corner strikes a chord, and suddenly...
The entire tavern erupts in a cacophony of off-key singing, impromptu drum circles on overturned tables,
Oh, yeah.
and possibly a bard challenging someone to a lute battle.
You get me. But seriously, how would Siren's Song actually work as a structured game?
Think of it as a musical game of charades.
Okay.
One player hums a tune, taps out a rhythm, or maybe even describes musical style, and the others have to guess the song or artist.
That's fantastic. It's a great way to encourage players to express themselves creatively, maybe even discover hidden talents within the group.
Exactly. And it can be tailored to fit any genre or setting. Imagine a swashbuckling sea shanty competition in a pirate-themed campaign, or a haunting melody echoing through a forgotten temple, its secrets waiting to be unlocked by those who can decipher the music.
This deep dive has been an absolute goldmine. I'm walking away with a notebook full of ideas to breathe life into my tavern scenes.
The best part is, these are just starting points.
Right.
The real magic happens when you, the game master, weave these games into your world, connecting them to your characters and stories.
So the next time your players belly up to that tavern bar, remember, it's not just a place to grab a drink and rest their weary bones. It's a stage for intrigue, a laboratory for alchemical mishaps, and maybe even the starting point for an epic ballad.
All good things.
All it takes is a little imagination and a willingness to let the games begin.